Mark Twain once wrote, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled." And when it comes to Islam, we're getting pranked. So this Christmas season, online retail giant Amazon was running this ad. It portrays a Muslim imam and a Christian priest meeting for a cup of tea and exchanging holiday gifts. It's a utopian vision of what could be. Oh, if only Islamophobia and I don't know, the whole host of isms just didn't exist. The ad was making the rounds online as the West was waking up to headlines of murderous jihadist attacks in Berlin and Turkey, while ISIS published its naughty or nice list, including all the US churches they'd like to attack. But here's the thing, when faced with the harsh reality of their new normal, the moral relativists of the snowflake generation, overexposed to a mythical portrayal of Islam akin to that Amazon ad, well, they can't help themselves from crying, but the Crusades. Literally, the exact same week that the Christmas markets were being shut down across Germany and others were being barricaded as far as Canada, as Europe was reaching peak enrichment with heavily armed guards surrounding nativity scenes across the continent, ignoramuses rushed to Twitter with the "he without sin cast the first stone" diatribe. Islamophobic Christians seem to forget that time when they had the Crusades. You can't blame a whole religion over the actions of a few, or Christians will have to own up to all the death calls during the Crusades. Funny how when the Christians are killed, it's terrorism, yet when Christians wiped entire races from the earth, it was called the Crusades. Okay, first of all, Islam is not a race. Second, look, I know schools have stopped teaching history in an even remotely objective manner, but here's a fun fact. The Crusades happened because of Islam, because Islam is not a religion of peace. The first crusade began in 1095, but it wasn't because Christians were looking to pick a fight with their neighbors and baptize the whole face of the planet. The first crusade was called only after 4 centuries of Muslim aggression. The first crusade was called 460 years after the first Christian city was overrun by Muslim armies. 457 years after Jerusalem was conquered by Muslims. 453 years after Egypt was taken. 443 years after Italy was plundered, 427 years after Muslims first laid siege to the Christian capital of Constantinople, 380 years after Muslims conquered Spain, 363 years after France was first attacked, and 249 years after the capital of Christendom, Rome itself, was sacked by a Muslim army. The First Crusade only came after centuries of church burnings, murder, enslavement, and forced conversions of Christians, all at the hands of Islam. And by the time the Crusades finally began, Muslim armies had conquered 2/3 of the Christian world. Look, if you want to keep living in your fantasy land where all religions are equal or where Islam is the victim, go ahead. But just so you know, history is repeating itself. Our nations are being invaded by millions of Muslim men of fighting age. This is a holy war, one that Islam started, indeed, one that Islam views as never having stopped in the first place. Islam is not a religion of peace. Its text, its prophet, and an enormous percentage of its adherents are hell-bent on breaking the cross, though they never will. There are 109 verses in the Quran that call Muslims to war with non-believers for the sake of Islamic rule. Some are quite graphic, with commands to chop off the heads and fingers and kill infidels. Their holy book also says that Muslims who do not join the fight are, quote, hypocrites, and are warned that Allah will send those people to hell if they don't join the slaughter. ISIS is losing ground and grip in Mosul, Raqqa, and now Aleppo, and so they're waging war elsewhere. They're waging war in our own backyard. And on certain fronts, well, they're winning. Territories within Berlin, Germany, France, and Britain have become Muslim no-go zones where Sharia law rules the land. And you don't need to look much further than, say the entire of North Africa and the Middle East, save Israel, to understand why countries with Judeo-Christian heritage are preferable to live in than those of the Mohammedan persuasion. But hey, if you want to keep blaming the Christians for the Crusades instead of acknowledging the fact that there's a group of murderous Muslims who wish to turn your country into their caliphate, be my guest. For the Rebel.media, I'm Faith Goldie.
Like what you just saw? Click below and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can see all my videos for therebel.media.